Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I'm joined today to my right and to your left by the wonderful Emily from the Adventist Millennial Podcast, and I do recommend that you all go over and take a look at that. Emily, how are we doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on. We've got a
Yeah.
full list of topics tonight. Of course, we were all promised earlier on in the week, if you were listening to some of the mainstreams like Rush, like I heard it from, that the Mueller Report was going to drop. And of course, we got teased by it again and rickrolled on it, and we didn't get to see it again. But we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about some of the events that have led up to the fact that we are waiting for this. Um, Out of your neck of the woods, like we said off mic here, there's possibly a cure for HIV that is being experimented with and being talked about. There have been some details put up to that, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Those who watch my solo videos will already know my thoughts on this, but it looks like the Senate has the votes now to overturn the national emergency and end it. We'll talk a little bit about the process of that, and we might even bring up our favorite show from when we were kids, Schoolhouse Rock, to talk about it a little bit more. As we always do on Ed's World, we are going to look at some of the presidential race, and for the first time this week, we get to actually announce people who aren't going to be running for president, rather than people who are going to be running for president. We'll talk a little bit about that. Those of you who saw my Sunday solo video know how I feel about this last topic here, but we will be talking about the anti-Semitism claims that came out of the House of Representatives this past week and in weeks prior. Given the topics of Emily's podcast, which she'll be talking about in a little bit, I hope, I think she would offer a very different insight onto this and a good insight onto this. So we'll have a great conversation about that, I think. And it's going to be all of this on more over on Ed's World. Make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button. Make sure if you're listening to this on the audio platforms, take some time and still go over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a good review and a 5-star rating because that really helps us grow this channel. Emily, since you were so kind to come here, why don't we start this with the most interesting topic out there? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm just a millennial, another run-of-the-mill millennial. But I have a podcast where I talk about my religious views. I'm a Christian, a Protestant Christian, and so I have a lot of peers who are leaving the church or have left the church, and so I wanted to talk about, why is that? What are some of the reasons? Is there anything that we can do about it? And some of my own struggles through that journey. And then, of course, every once in a while, I'll touch on culture, maybe politics, even though I try not to make that my main focus. Yeah, so, just living my best life, I guess you could say.
Maybe if we have time and this whole packed show runs us long, we can maybe talk a little bit about that off at the end of the show, because we did touch a little bit about that off mic before we went recording.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that would be an interesting thing for the listeners. One of my favorite questions to always ask, something I always ask to all my guests, is how did you get into alternative media in the first place? How did you decide that you wanted your voice to be heard around the country?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that I think people, not everyone, maybe some people do, but not everyone realizes the ramifications before they do it. Because once you're out there, you're out there. But I listen to a lot of stuff on YouTube, especially podcasts, of course. People my age do a lot of that sort of thing. So I kind of got hooked into the sort of like conservative alternative media world on YouTube. And I've always been interested in writing and content creation and stuff, but I don't necessarily have a big knowledge of politics or I'm interested in it, but I don't have a huge necessarily I guess you could say agenda to share about politics. So the thing that I can speak to is my experience in religion, because that's been a huge part of my experience. So I was like, I see a need for this because of where I see all of my peers at, and maybe one or two people out there might be able to benefit from what I can say. So Yeah, that's how it happened.
There we are, Reverend Emily. Maybe one day.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'm pretty satisfied with how that went there. That was some good insight into that, and I thank you for that. But we do have a very dense show sitting in front of us
Yeah.
here, so if you want to jump right into it, I'm ready when you are.
Sure, let's do it.
So to start out with, I was listening to the Rush Limbaugh show earlier on in the week, and he started talking about the fact that the Mueller report was going to drop either that day, I believe that was Tuesday. It was going to drop Tuesday or Wednesday, and all other news was going to stop instantly as soon as that happened.
Of course, of course.
That was on Tuesday or Wednesday. It is now, for you and I, it's Monday, but for everybody else, it's going to be Tuesday or later. And we still haven't seen any report drop. But
it's always coming. It's always about to come. It's always like right on the cusp.
But of course, there have been some major changes in that story that have come up into the lead up, and that may be why people are starting to expect that it's going to be coming here. Obviously, with the fact that this is about to drop, we've been hearing the talk about the impeachment is coming, and what's going to be the impeachment. Have you seen any of that going on around you in the news?
Well, I have. I mean, people have been saying since the moment he got elected, like, that impeachment is imminent and coming. I saw today on Twitter that Nancy Pelosi finally had the guts to step up and say she doesn't think it's worth it, even if there's a reason to. She doesn't want to create the division. So I'm skeptical that even if they had something to impeach him on, that they actually would. We'll see though. They really want it. They want it pretty badly.
Yeah, that's been the thing too. They've been talking about that. They do want it pretty badly. I mean, I remember the day after the election just going up onto Google, and I was looking for how to do something else, and it was how to, and the first suggestion was how to impeach the president.
Yeah.
Before the inauguration.
Right. And the whole thing of like, if before the election was finished, if Trump loses, he better, accept the reality and accept the loss or whatever. And then the second he wins, everyone's like, impeach this. It can't be legitimate.
Well, what they're looking at right now on doing is essentially impeaching him on a process crime. The end of the Mueller report the writing on the wall seems to be that there isn't going to be anything that comes out of it. He's got nothing. They've been talking about that since the beginning of it. But now they're going to get him on obstruction of justice because he fired James Comey, which Barack should have done himself, but that's my own personal opinion on James Comey, not necessarily the politics behind it.
Yeah, it's you would think if there was actually something as leaky as everything has been since he got in office, something would have leaked by now. I'm just highly, highly skeptical that there's anything serious. All of the indictments that have come for other people involved haven't actually had to do with Russia. So it's like, really, I would be very surprised if there was anything really serious in the report when it finally comes out.
Well, that's the thing, too. They keep saying that it's going to be coming out just because of what's happened. I mean, the Cohen thing was the thing that said, okay, Cohen's going to testify now because this is definitely coming out right now. And then he gave, a 6-hour testimony in front of... What chamber did he give that in front of? Was it in front of the House? Yeah, it was, because Cortez...
I think so, yeah.
Because Cortez was questioning him, so that would have been in front of the House.
Yeah, the scariest cross-examiner.
Just on a side note, how would we ever know if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was questioning somebody? Her voice raises after everything she says. It's like an invisible question mark after every word after every sentence she says.
That's like a trope of female speaking, right? That's another reason why I guess we shouldn't have women in there. Everything sounds like a question.
I think I stole that joke from Family Guy, I'm not going to lie. I think that was something to do with one of Brian Griffin's girlfriends. But yeah, they talked about the fact that he was coming to Congress to testify just based on the fact that this was about to come, which I think, again, that was just him trying to score some time off of jail and a book deal or a movie deal or whatever
Yeah.
else it was that they tried to question him on.
Yeah.
But the Manafort sentencing, that popped up too, which that just makes me lose faith in everything out that comes out of this because I mean, yes, okay, Manafort committed the crime, but what was it, 20 years ago?
Yeah, and aren't correct me if I'm wrong, aren't most of these like finance violations and fraud and things like that things that everybody does and you could indict pretty much everyone on if you really looked closely at them?
Oh, you could indict a ham sandwich if you really wanted to make that indictment so fast.
Right. I mean, I feel like I've heard the argument, I think from like Andrew Clavin or someone that none of these things they would not have been indicted for any of these things if it hadn't been for them just trying to scrape up something on the Mueller report. I tend to find that highly plausible.
Well, yeah, the biggest part of it. That's the biggest frustration that I have with any of this is the fact that, this was an unlimited scope investigation, so they could go back into anything that they wanted to, just so they can say this person got indicted, that person got indicted, this person
Yeah.
got it. They never talk about what the indictment is for. They just talk about the fact that the person got
Right.
indicted.
Exactly. And I was reading several articles about it today, and there were all these super long articles, and not to the very, very, very end. And did they say, and by the way, none of the indictments had anything to do with Russia, and it was explicitly said by the judge that none of this had anything to do with Russia. But that's beside the point, of course.
I've wanted to say this for a while. I've been talking about this on my solo channel for almost as long as I've been doing it. I I do want to see what's in this report. I wish they would drop it and get it over with already by this point because I mean, at what point is this going to be over? And I know a lot of people will say, well, they investigated Benghazi for 4 years.
I mean, yeah, I don't know exactly. I don't know enough to know what's holding them up, but clearly, it's like a stalling thing because if they have nothing, there have been illusions that there's not really much there from many places. So, like, why can't we just do it already?
Well, and as dangerous as they say that the man is, you'd think that they would want it to drop right away and get him out of office just as
Right.
soon as possible.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's all a farce. It's a huge farce.
It is. It's a bit entertaining to watch, I'm not going to lie, but again, I want to see what's in this report. I want to see what's written. They say that you can go out and buy this on Amazon already. I want to go out and buy this and just read it cover to cover one day and just see my tax dollars at work.
Right. Yeah, that's the other thing. Let's just keep spending more and more money on this because we're all really enjoying that aspect of it.
Well, everyone's a fiscal hawk now that wasn't a fiscal hawk for 8 years, and everyone who was a fiscal hawk for 8 years is suddenly no longer a fiscal hawk, and now nobody
Yeah.
knows what's going on.
Yeah. Uh,
Do you think they're gonna find something on him? And what do you think will happen afterwards? That's gonna be the interesting idea.
yeah, I mean, no, I don't think they'll find anything on him, and I think he will, when they don't, assuming they don't, he will gloat until the cows come home, and that's probably a huge part of why they're trying to stall. They want to put off Trump's flurry of tweets when he says, ha 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 ha, you guys didn't have anything on me, and you're not impeaching me, and, screw all of you. But we'll see. I would be very surprised if they actually, and then, like Pelosi said today, even if they do have something, are they willing to actually try to impeach? I mean, it's not like they're going to be able to be effective in their impeachment. It's just going to, draw this process out even. I mean, I wouldn't put that past the Democrats, actually. They've drawn it out for 2 years already. But no, I would be highly skeptical.
You're a little younger than me. A lady doesn't say her age out loud, so you don't have to say. But were you cognizant during the Clinton impeachment?
No, not really. I mean, I knew things were happening, but I was too young to really be understanding all the implications and know following it. I just knew
Yeah.
it was a big drama.
97. I would have been in 7th grade. I actually was just starting to get cognizant to what was going
Mhm.
on, which,
Mhm.
in my high school, that was where, or my high school, in my middle school, that was where we learned civics was in 7th grade too. So that was a really good backdrop for the civics education for the civics class, and some of the processes that go on during an impeachment. But I mean, the last time we had an impeachment, it was purely political. It was process crimes. So if they're going to try and pull process crimes on this president, that wouldn't be unprecedented. And it was Republicans that were putting up process crimes for it. But Republicans got shellacked after they impeached Bill Clinton, and he was acquitted by the Senate. And I mean, it was almost embarrassing. It was to the point of like Nixonian level of Republican, or the loss of faith in Republicans at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I can't. I can't see any. I don't. I would be very surprised if there was a scenario where they could be successful because, you know, in my limited child understanding of what was happening, um, Clinton was certainly impeachable. Uh, I really don't think there is something substantial there. But what do I know? The Dems, they're gonna get him. They will get him at some point. They promised.
I have not researched this to see if it's true or not. I probably should have done that before we went on and started recording this. But I heard some rumor out there that not Rashida, was it Rashida? No, Ilhan Omar did file for the articles of impeachment, which would be the second time in this presidency that it's happened.
Yeah, how shocking from someone like her, yeah.
Oh yes, we'll be talking about that a little bit later. I'm I'm almost willing to skip the rest of the show just to hear what you have to say on that.
I
But
don't know that I have a lot to say on it. I mean, anything spicy to say about it.
and back to your point, I think you're right that Pelosi doesn't want to do that because she doesn't want to lose her hand over the House right now. They did a lot of work to get their hands into the House to begin with. And, in 98, or I'm sorry, not 98. In 96, Clinton did get reelected for the presidency again while he was under the investigation. And again, the Democrats lost, or the Republicans rather, lost the House and the Senate in 98. So,
Yeah.
is it worth
We'll
it?
see. Yeah, right, exactly. I don't know. We'll see what happens. This week for sure, it's gonna happen. It's gonna come out.
I think what Rush had to say about that was actually interesting and probably really true. I struggled when I was starting to make this itinerary at first, but, a bunch of stuff jumped in towards the end of the week. But, I mean, this was a slow news week as far as most things were concerned. So it
What
was.
was Russ saying? I didn't hear him.
Well, he said that's where I was going with this. Some of the news cycles were running a little bit slower than normal, and
Oh,
people were being a little bit better behaved than they normally would be because, as soon as this thing drops, all the news is going to stop.
yeah.
And that's all that we're going to hear from cable news and radio news and everything else for the next 3 weeks until somebody else does something stupid.
Here's a question.
Go ahead.
If there's nothing in it, how are they gonna spin it into a huge news story? Like, what's their angle gonna be if there's nothing there?
Well, first off, they're gonna focus on the process crime rather than what was actually there, but I think you're right. They're gonna have to justify why they opened the investigation in the first place. I mean, that's right there as a violation of 4A. If there was nothing there, they've been investigating nothing. That is huge.
Well, and they'll probably, I don't know. I could see them doing like self-justification of like, because it went on so long, that means it's something. But even though it was nothing, it went on super long in like that circular logic, I don't know. I'll be interested to see what
I'd love to see the books on this. That's what I want to see. That's what I'm interested in.
20 years down the road. This
Yeah.
will be a historical event that you can write a book about.
Well, I mean, not Not the written books. I actually want to see the financial books on this, the
Oh,
financial
oh, yeah,
statements.
those too. Yeah.
I think that'd be interesting to see what all was spent money on. I want to see the expense reports because it's got to be huge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
Mueller's not working for free. He was a six-figure judge before he ever went into any of this.
Oh, was he? I didn't know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's expensive. Why? Yeah. I don't think anybody is really thrilled about this except for the people who are hoping something will come out of it.
You mean Cortez, Tlaib, and Omar?
Yeah. And all the
Holy trifecta.
lefty social justice warriors who are convinced that they're living in a nightmare and any day they're going to wake up and realize he's being impeached.
I think a lot of those people don't even know what impeachment is. That's one of the scariest things that I've realized coming out of this is they think that somebody's going to file impeachment and the president is going to be immediately removed from office.
That's how it works, isn't it?
Well, again, that was how it was actually initially taught to us, was that the impeachment was an immediate removal from office. When I first learned about impeachment, that's what it was. It was Nixon would have been impeached and he would have been removed from office, and that was the way that they phrased it. So, of course, a lot of people were confused about that. But he resigned before he could be impeached. When in reality, it's just a trial. It's an investigation and then a trial.
Yeah, right.
Well, we've officially done the same thing that the mainstream media has done and spent 20 minutes talking about absolutely nothing. Congratulations, you'll get hired by CNN after this show.
Perfect.
But let's take some time and talk about the story, as we mentioned, from your neck of the woods, where there actually might be some good news on the frontier. We talk so much politics on this show, we always talk about bad news, but there might be some good news on the frontier because we have a confirmed case in which HIV was cured in a man, and it seems like there is a second case now where there has been a cure for HIV, and doctors are, of course, working on expanding this. The laws that put this into place came out of California. What do I want to say? They're allowing stem cells to be used to do this kind of thing. I'm sure you could probably see a lot more of this on local news than I see on national news. What do you know about this so far?
Yeah, not tons, but apparently, yeah, they're using stem cell bone marrow transplants to cure HIV. But the interesting thing that I read about it was that it was only for patients who already had cancer. It was like a cancer and AIDS double whammy treatment. And it was also, I read, limited to one really, really small minority, like Northern European descent people who have a certain sort of like mutation that allows this AIDS blocking medically terminology stuff. But so that they had to be a genetic match to the person they were giving to. So not only do you have to have cancer, you have to have AIDS, and you have to be of Norwegian descent. So hooray for those people who hit that cross section. And then also it's like really dangerous and prohibitively expensive. So I don't know. What do you think? I was reading that, yeah, it's a breakthrough as far as stem cell research, but then at the same time, like, it's not a practical solution that will bring any kind of horizon of hope for AIDS sufferers.
Well, I mean, from what I see out of it, and I actually didn't know that it was only if you had cancer with it. I read that it was the fact that the first patient had cancer, and that was how it was discovered. It was almost discovered by accident in that sort of context. I didn't know you had to have cancer for it to be effective. But I mean, it's a great first step, and it's something that we can look at and see how the body works, how the body reacts to things, and possibly mutate this now into finding something else that we can use in order to, make this be something that's mainstream, make this be something that everybody who has HIV can get. I mean, I'm sure you already know, being where you are in California, that your state made it decriminalized to and knowingly infect somebody with HIV. I want to make sure I
Yeah,
get that all
hooray
correct.
for that. Yeah. Yeah, what a great incentive. Well, and everything that I was reading, it was like, okay, maybe this is a breakthrough for the future, but our focus should still remain preventing HIV in the first place, and managing it for people who already have it. Okay, so decriminalizing transmitting it knowingly is a great step towards helping prevent it from spreading. Good work, you guys.
Well, that's how they get test patients.
Apparently.
Wow, that was really dark. Well, we're off the air, so
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. And there's the, I don't know how it affects, of course, homosexuals. It affects people who use intravenous drugs. But then you also have outside of the United States epidemics of it all over Africa and stuff. S- Solutions or cures like bone marrow transplants are not going to be applicable across huge populations. So I don't know. I mean, research is research, I suppose, but I don't know how if it's actually as newsworthy maybe as people hope it is.
well, the thing that I look at it on it for me, and this is something I'm actually really excited for, is the fact that this is a starting point because I remember the '90s when this started becoming a big thing, and people still thought that you could get it from mostly heterosexual sex. So that was the biggest panic, is because we had become such a society that was so promiscuous at the time. And I look now at the generation behind us and see that they've kind of rolled that back a little bit. But that was a big panic in the '90s, and the first thing that everybody said is there is no cure. This is going to kill you, and there is no cure. And now we're starting to see evidence of the change of that there could be a cure, and it could happen in our lifetimes even.
Yeah.
They've got the stepping point. They know what they can do to try and make this go away. Now they just need to figure out how to implement this to the broader public.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, ultimately apparently antiretroviral drugs help people manage it.
Mm-hmm.
So until you can find a cure that's applicable enough across a large group of people for affordable enough, I feel like people will just still use their management drugs because it is still dangerous too, even if they I can actually cure it. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, we'll see.
And it's still, I think it's a great thing that we've come far enough. I mean, once again, to cite the '90s, which this is apparently going to be the '90s show because, I mean, we talked all about Clinton in the last topic, and now we're talking about that in this point. I mean, there was no management even back then. It was, you found out you had HIV or AIDS, and that was your death sentence.
Yeah.
We might as well just make you comfortable and let you lay out and die. Now we have
Yeah.
drugs that can manage this, and a first step towards actually eradicating this from at least our country.
Yeah. Yep.
Forget Canada. We don't need to send it over to them. They don't send us their cheap prescription drugs.
You're on your own, Canada.
Mexico, maybe. If they stop sending us their worst, maybe we'll share it with them. That's
Well,
how
if they
we.
stop sending their drugs.
That's
and
how we end the
spreading it.
wall thing.
What,
That's how.
sending AIDS to them?
No.
Oh.
Tell them that we'll send them the cure if they stop sending us their worst people and their drugs. We don't need a wall at that point.
Advertise them? No, they're not gonna buy it. They like their people having AIDS. Because then they can just pawn them off over here.
They do enough of that. I obviously wouldn't encourage you to say the city. I know that you've said on your podcast you're in Southern California. How far are you from the border?
Pretty, pretty far. I mean, San Diego is closer than me. I'll say that. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of Hispanic community here, just because we're like all along the border states, Texas all the way through to here. But we're not like super close to the border.
I've heard and I've seen pictures that all that there is for a border down there is a little wooden fence that you can walk over. Is that true?
I don't know. I haven't been there. I do hear that there's a big section of fence in San Diego, though, which would make sense because San Diego's too nice to let it be overrun.
I think that was. I hate bringing my ex up on this show, but I think that was where she went. My last girlfriend was very into reptiles, and I know a bunch of her friends went down to somewhere in Southern California to actually go and see some various snakes and lizards out in the desert. And
Huh.
one of the things that she did was took a second and found this wooden fence and stepped over it, and
Nice.
almost
Yeah.
immediately her phone said, "You are now on international roaming."
Danger. Yeah, no, I haven't been down there, but I mean, from the pictures, from the horrifying pictures, I imagine it's pretty bad.
I have been through Border Patrol.
Oh, really?
I have. If you go to Tombstone in Arizona, which I did on a tourist trip myself, going down there, you don't get to the border when you're there, but you get far enough down there you have to come through the checkpoint on your way back. Because
Yeah.
the checkpoint isn't actually on the border. It's, what, 10 miles up from it?
Yeah. When I grew up in Texas, when I was a kid, a really small kid, like, I don't know, I must have been like 4. Remember we went down to Mexico for, I don't know, family vacation for what? I don't know, but apparently we drove down there. All I remember from it is that I dropped one of my flip-flops in the Rio Grande and had to be carried for the rest of the time. And I was like, I'm okay with it.
I hear there are a lot of flip-flops in the Rio Grande.
Yes, including one of mine. So,
Including one very small one.
yeah.
4-year-old size.
Hopefully someone caught it and used it as a floaty to float back to Mexico.
This is terrible. I have no hope for monetization after this show, which is fine.
I mean, did you ever have a hope to begin with?
You've heard my show before this, right?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. Well, that's all I have off the HIV topic. We're kind of flying through, which is okay because the last couple of shows I've had have run really long.
Oh.
But let's take some time here and talk a little bit about something I've already talked about myself, but I'm sure that the listening audience would love to hear back and forth on this. Over the last couple of weeks, we've heard about the national emergency. Speaking of the Rio Grande and the wall, our president has declared that there is a national emergency on the border. I believe he was right in doing that. Certain guests in my past believe that he was not right in doing that, but they're very open borders types. The House of Representatives believe that it is wrong for the president to have a national emergency at the border. Their answer to that would be to invoke USC 15? U.S. Code 50 to get the national emergency overturned. To do this, they need a simple joint resolution throughout the House and then the Senate to get to the president's desk, which is going to be the most interesting part of this, and another month-long news cycle, I promise you. It, of course, easily passed through the House because it only needs a simple majority, and everyone thought that it was going to die in the Senate. Our usual suspects, Linda Murkowski, Susan Collins, have said that they weren't going to vote for it, and one other that wasn't a usual suspect, which would have left us at 50-50 in the Senate, easily broken by Mike Pence. But now Rand Paul has come out and said that he is going to vote to overturn the national emergency as well. Let's start with you. How much do you know about this thus far?
I mean, yeah, I guess that's not surprising coming from Murkowski and Collins. And honestly, it's not that surprising coming from Rand Paul. I've heard mixed sentiments on the state of emergency from people on the right, from conservatives. Because while, yes, they want things to get done at the border, the state of emergency is not consensus as the best way to go about that. So I'm not super surprised to hear that Rand Paul is going to help block it. But ultimately, from what I read, he would veto anyway. So is it? I guess someone like Rand Paul is super hard on principle, so he wouldn't compromise. But either way, I don't know. I mean, if he's just gonna veto it anyway.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I went when I did my solo video on the entire situation as it was. It's an interesting way to actually see some of the stuff that we saw in Schoolhouse Rock at work because, I mean, there were a ton of vetoes through the Obama administration, but nobody in the world could have named one. This is actually Trump's first veto coming out. But
Oh, is it?
it is, yeah. This would be the first time in 2 years that Trump has actually had a veto on anything at all. Which is surprising because he was supposed to be this massive authoritarian that...
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that we talk about Rand Paul on this because, I had Jen the Libertarian on my show a couple weeks ago, who is a very open borders libertarian, and that is a sentiment that seems to carry across the libertarian movement, and since the conservatives right now have adopted the libertarians, that's sort of where we get the mixed ideas where you were hearing between people on the right, whether or not this was a good idea or whether or not this was a bad idea. I think that obviously that's going to be a big part of the reason that Rand Paul decides that he's going to go with this. I think it's, like you said, it's on principle. It's going to be his deep belief in the open border system because of his association with the Libertarian Party. Even though he's not registered in that party, he's got deep ties into that, and that's kind of where he puts his belief system out to.
Wait, is Rand Paul for open borders? I didn't realize that.
If he is, if he's as strict into the libertarian policy as he says he is, then he would be. I can't speak for him personally, and I didn't see anything in any of the news stories I read about this to say that he is specifically for open borders, but
Yeah.
I could see him being for open borders all the same.
Yeah, I haven't heard him talk about it either, and I hadn't heard from anywhere else that he was open borders. My initial thought was that he would be opposing the method, like the possible precedent in overreach of use of emergency powers. But like you said, I don't know for sure either.
Well, that's kind of where I fell onto this too, because initially when I first started hearing about this, I was an advocate for doing this legislatively because that's the only way that I ever want to see any of this get done. But also, you have to consider the fact that legislatively, in 1976, Congress did cede this power to the president. Now, if you want to put the tinfoil on and realize the fact that this was in 1976, and I'm sure Congress believed right after the Nixon resignation that we would never, ever have another Republican president again, if you want to get that deep into it. But either way, the Congress did legally cede this power over to the president.
Yeah. Yeah, I just Googled. Rand Paul opposes amnesty, supports securing borders, and reforming legal immigration. So yeah, my guess is that he's more opposed to the precedent that it will set and the particular use of it.
So we've got the situation now where this is actually going to pass the Senate, which doesn't surprise me, to be completely honest, because there's enough never Trump sentiment in the Republican Party. You never hear about it, obviously, because everybody who is a Republican is an evil Trump supporter. Just ask MSNBC. But obviously we're going to look at this. This is going to go forward. And the White House has already issued a statement that says that the president intends to veto this. So what do you think the next step is? What do you think we're going to get out of the news, first off, out of this? And what do you think the next step is going to be after that?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the news will probably spike the ball over blocking it, and then when it comes to veto, they'll start kicking and screaming and calling him an authoritarian. And then after that, I mean, I guess it will eventually go to the courts, won't it?
Presidential veto, no, does not go to the courts. It goes back to Congress.
Oh.
Come on. Uh, right now, I'm just a bill sitting on the steps of Capitol Hill. Come on, you remember this.
I didn't watch that. Yeah, to be honest, I don't know enough about process to really speak intelligently here. All I know is that there will be more complaining, more flailing, more. Oh, by the way, speaking of, made me think of. Did you see Trump's tweet on wacky nut job and Coulter?
Yeah, I'm actually. That's going to be my next Sunday's video, is talking about that. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that Brady and I are going to be talking about that a little bit next week when he comes on the show.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, he has plenty to say about his thoughts on his own move here with the state of emergency, and obviously, the press has plenty to say on how dumb anything and everything he does is, and then obviously, uh, we're not going to get anything done in the legislative branch. So, like, par for the course, I guess.
Do you have a dog?
Yeah. Sorry, he's
I was trying to figure out what was moving
rolling
back
around.
there.
Yeah, he's rolling around.
Well, I can give you a little brief rundown on what happens on the legislative process on that,
All right,
because
hit me.
that is something that I've seen here, and given what we know about the government already, you can probably actually form a pretty coherent idea of what will happen next. If a veto goes to the president, whether he outright vetoes it, which in this point he is going to do so, or if he does what's called a pocket veto, where he does nothing, the term comes from initially in the government, where the president would just put the bill into his pocket and not let anything happen there. The bill then goes back to Congress. Congress can override a veto with 2/3 of a vote in both chambers. I don't think they have the votes. I think they can get a couple of people on board, as we're seeing with the Senate, and we even saw a few people over in the House. But I did the math on the vote to get this over to the Senate. 56%.
Wow. Yeah, good luck.
I don't think there are that many never Trumper Congress people out there. I don't think there are that many people out there that want to go back to their MAGA districts and say, okay, I did this.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be unlikely, I would say.
I don't know, because you live in Southern California. You live in a relatively very blue area.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that you see on Twitter and everywhere else, but I'm sure you don't see it firsthand. I live out in flyover country. MAGA is a religion. There are certain of these Congress people who are not going to be able to go back to their districts and say, I tried to override a veto.
Yeah, and I think that even, well, despite anyone's personal feelings about it, that's why we only see Murkowski, Collins, Paul, and who was the other one?
Tillis.
Tillis, yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, people are beholden to their constituents, which is kind of how it's supposed to be.
Well, it's interesting too. There were a series of other people out there that have said that maybe I'll get on board with this. Nobody's actually confirmed it like Rand Paul did. If we read the writing on the wall and take it all for what it is, both senators in my state are planning on voting for this. One definitely in character, Tammy Baldwin, who is a very progressive intersectional Democrat. But the business-friendly Ron Johnson is also possibly on board with voting to get this over to the president's desk, which really surprised me when I saw the statement about it. Because we've got one of each in my state.
Yeah.
Both your senators are Democrats, correct?
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I know who both of them are. Never mind.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that part of that is based on the fact that only Los Angeles and Sacramento vote for your senators.
Good old California.
I like some aspects of California, but I don't know where you are, but from what I understand from what you've said and what I know, they're all on the other side.
Who's all on what other side?
There's a carnivorous plant nursery in over by Oakland that I would actually love to go and visit one day.
Oh, nice. Carnivorous plants. That sounds exciting.
Yeah, I've got a little garden of them. I was working on them all day, actually.
Oh, cool. Sounds fun. Well, actually, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of dangerous plants. We went to Joshua Tree during the shutdown, by the way. That was interesting. And I got spiked with cholla cactuses. This has been like 3 months ago, and I think there's still something in there, because, man, all over my fingers. Anyway.
Now that we've gone completely off topic on this.
Sorry.
I said it was going to be all this and more. But I mean, that's what's coming up out of this. I'm a little bit surprised at the fact that the Senate is going to send this over. So many people in the news media said that, oh, well, Republicans gain more influence in the Senate. That means that the Senate is going to rule everything. It's going to be the end of the world. And now we're seeing the fact that that's actually not the truth. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
One side is willing to work with the other side. The other side isn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, conservatives say they go on principle. Democrats apparently go on, their principle is against Trump. So you can count on them to act in that way.
Well, we can't talk about the Senate without talking about who all is going to be going into the presidency, because as we've seen in history, the Senate is one of the quickest tickets to get onto the presidential ticket, as we're coming up on anyway. So let's take a little bit of time and talk about who wants to run for president, and for the first time since the show was incepted, let's talk about who doesn't want to run for president. This past week, John Hickenlooper decided that he was going to enter the race. I loved Brady Leonard's commentary on this over on the No Gimmicks podcast, because he said, just based on the name, we are never ever going to have a President Hickenlooper. But
never know.
Mayor Bloomberg came out and said that he wasn't going to run for the president, and perhaps shocking the most people of all of this country, as of right now, Hillary Clinton has said that she is not going to run for president.
Is it really shocking, though? Is it shocking?
She's been running for president since her husband was the president.
Yeah, but, like, how many times does she have to get beaten to a pulp to just, like, dip out, finally?
Apparently it isn't enough for Bernie Sanders, because he's still coming in, and
he's back for more.
out of the declared candidates, somehow he's the front runner. I can't figure that out to save my life.
I think at this point, name recognition, right?
Well, that could be.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, if and when Biden gets in, he'll be the front runner.
Yeah.
He has lots of name recognition, and then once we get into the debates, it'll be interesting. But yeah, I would imagine at this point it's mostly name recognition.
One of the things that really surprised me, and this might go back to name recognition, I'm going to be talking about Elizabeth Warren and the fact that she wants to break up the tech companies this coming Thursday, but she's still somehow viable on this list, and I can't figure out how. That is the greatest mystery of my lifetime, is how she is still viable at this point.
I think really she's holding on by a thread because of her crack open a beer Instagram was so relatable.
Was that actually Elizabeth Warren, or was that a robot that was dressed up to look like Elizabeth Warren?
No, it was her Native American stand-in. Yeah, I'm baffled how she's still trying for as many and various ways in which she has embarrassed herself thoroughly. And it continues to happen, but she's still plugging away to our joy and entertainment.
Well, I'm not so surprised that she's still trying. That seems like, with the fact that she had this Native American scandal and the fact that the card came out, it does seem like she's the kind of person who would do anything to win. The thing that blows me away is the fact that she's still polling this high. 9%.
Yeah, that is the surprising part because she is and has been so ridiculous. The fact that people still are saying that she's viable, but I, I don't know. There was something that I was gonna say and it just left me. Sorry, I don't know what I was gonna
Well,
say.
we millennials are getting older.
It had to do with the. Who
Do,
knows?
do, do, do.
What were you saying right before that?
The fact that Elizabeth Warren is still polling this high. That was the last thing
Yeah,
I said.
yeah.
I can't believe that to save my life.
Yeah, it is very surprising. I remember now what I was going to say. We've seen from the precedent that was set in the 2016 election that we are now willing to vote for entertainment value. So, maybe that's it.
I can't argue that. I cannot argue against that to save my life.
I mean, honestly, if it comes down to all of those, Bernie is highly entertaining. Warren is highly entertaining. Maybe throw in Booker for a little bit of drama, but they're the two most entertaining just because they're so ridiculous and laughable.
I mean, how can you talk about Booker as entertainment? I mean, how many gladiators had to die in those arenas like that? For Spartacus to come out like that.
The amount of drama that man can put on is incredible. He just when he gets in the camera, you can see it all over his face that he's so thrilled to be able to put on this show for everyone.
Oh, I never want to be between Cory Booker and a camera. That's almost as dangerous as being between Acosta and a camera.
Jim, look at me. I'm Jim Acosta.
I crack up every time I hear Clavin do that, and there's just that deadpan voice.
Yeah, I mean, we're through the looking glass, so it's highly a high possibility that people are just like, let's go, entertain us. We're here to be entertained. We're not getting anything done in the government anyway. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket anyway. So at the very least, give us a good show.
So you're saying they're going down the Nirvana path to fame. Here we are now, entertain us.
Exactly. Yeah. And if that's the case, if it could be said that Elizabeth Warren was savvy enough to build that persona, I mean, props to her. Unfortunately, I think she's just a little bit one too many mishaps into it. But well, if it was strategic, that'd be one thing.
Well, I know it's fun to laugh at all of the candidates who are going to try and be president and the ones who are not going to be president, but there has been one kind of serious topic that came out of all of this, and I wanted to touch on this, and I wanted, to actually have a chance to talk about this week. I put a poll out on my Twitter to see what they wanted me to talk about this past Sunday, whether it be Omar or whether it be the slavery reparations discussion that's surrounding our presidential candidacy, and Omar won out, because that's infinitely
Nobody
more...
wants to talk about reparations? What?
Well, apparently all of the presidential candidates want to talk about that, which I
mean, I guess they're pandering to the black vote, but honestly, I mean, I don't know. How much is the general population of black people really wanting reparations to be a huge item? I don't know. I guess I can't speak to that.
Well, and it goes further than that. I mean, okay, 1880, I could see reparations being a big deal. I could see that. As much immigration as we've had into this country, I mean, how do you decide who's going to be getting reparations, who's going to be what reparations, and who's going to be giving to it? Because, I mean, it's been 160 years.
Right. Yeah. It's an infinite web of untangleable mess. And Ann Coulter, wacky nut job Ann Coulter, brings this up all the time. Who exactly, is it all black people? Is it descendants of slaves? Is it Mexicans who came in and want reparations too? Is it like how is this going to be implemented in any reasonable way? And it's not. It's just not feasible.
Well, obviously, of course, they want to bring the color into it. Right. Because that's going to be it. If you look at my family tree, On my dad's side of my family, we go all the way back to before the Revolutionary War. So one could obviously possibly say I might be on the hook for some of that. If you look on my mom's side of the family, the majority of them came back in the late 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
Like 1890s and after.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember my family tree correctly, my great-grandmother, born in 1910, was the first one of that family born in this country.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't own slaves.
You just get to pay a portion then. But actually, no, because you're white, just the full portion. The other question I've heard brought up is like, black slave owners? Do they just balance out? Like, they're black, so they get reparations, but they had slaves, so they have to pay, so it's just an even.
Yeah, that's a thing that you have obviously heard that brought up. I have not heard that brought up, is the fact that there were African Americans, freed slaves that owned other slaves.
Exactly, yeah. What do you do about that?
We never hear about that when we watch Glory.
Answer that, Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, who doesn't have any African descent as far as I know.
And whose Jamaican descent has disowned her at this point.
Oh, that was so funny. Oh, that was
a pretty big kick out of that.
Yeah, Jen and I got to talk about that too. That was great because that happened right before, like the day before she came on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
I
was
come from a rich heritage of weed.
Wow, this travesty. Yeah. Nice job, Kamala.
I come from a rich heritage of weed, so that means that I was smoking it in 1986, listening to Snoop Dogg, 5 years before he released an album. You think he was serenading her? You think that could have been?
Well, maybe she hallucinated it. Maybe she's a prophet. Maybe she prophesied Snoop Dogg's first album before it happened. You never know.
Okay, if you can hallucinate from smoking weed, I smoked it in the wrong state when I was smoking it at the time. I need to come down and visit you guys, apparently, because you guys have good stuff.
Well, considering the fact that everything else was a fabrication, why not add hallucination into it?
I don't know, because you want to be actually legitimately viable to be the president?
Or believable by saying you listened to Snoop Dogg before he had his first album? Mm-hmm. She really thought that one through.
It sounded good at the time. I'm sure nobody on her side questioned it. Who do you think's going to get to the top? Now that we don't have to actually announce somebody's running. You get to be the first guest to make that prediction.
I don't know. I mean, the assumption is Biden will get in the race, right? He hasn't officially.
Yeah, but he's got his campaign headquarters up in North Carolina. He's going to do it. I don't know what he's waiting for. But I think he stalls, honestly.
You think? I don't know. I do think that Harris has a shot. Bernie, I mean, we saw it last time. DNC didn't want him. They cut his legs out from under him. You think they're going to let it happen this time? I doubt it.
Well, that and the fact that he's going to be 79
Yeah.
on election day.
Yeah. And that he's just, as ridiculous as AOC in his comments. I guess that didn't stop him before. But yeah, I don't think the DNC will let that happen. And so I guess I would have to say Harris or Biden if he gets in the race.
My exact reaction when I heard that Bernie was going to be coming into the race was, yes, yes, oh my God, yes, 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 I get to watch this again. Yes, this has actually
More
happened.
pudding.
Yes, oh my God, yes, yes, end quote.
Well, the sad part to me is all of the Bernie bros who actually give him legitimacy and actually think he has good ideas. Like, people that I know in real life are just so it's baffling to me.
One of my best friends in the world is a staunch Bernie supporter.
Yeah, I don't know. Just do some reading, people. Do some reading.
But it's going to be free, and it's going to be fair.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, everything is gonna be free.
I do want to see Kamala get to the end. I don't think she's going to, but I want to see it.
Yeah, of all the various and sundry women, she is the most competent appearing. However, she's not likable. Gillibrand and the other people are just so Klobuchar. They just come off so like incompetent and awful, like kind of like Hillary. She actually can put together something halfway decent sounding, but she's not. I don't find her likable in the least, and I don't think that her side, the left side, will like that she's a prosecutor either. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, I want to see her get to the end just for the entertainment value myself. You know how your primaries work down there. What's one thing that Kamala Harris has never done?
What?
Run against a Republican.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, I want to see her get slapped around by Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, well, hey, that's another good angle that I haven't thought about. Who would be the most entertaining in a debate? I mean, you got to go with Bernie, right?
Yeah, I do want to listen to that. Well, this is going to be free, and the man across the aisle from me is the most evil man in the world.
Yeah, just two old men, like, going off on tangents.
In New York accents.
Yeah, that'll be super exciting.
I mean, I know all about the Northeast accent. But getting to listen to it like that, yeah, that'd be...
I would tune in for that.
In full honesty, Biden, I think, stalls out. Most people think that he's the one that makes it to the end. I think he stalls out based on doing the same thing that Hillary does, because Bernie brings out the worst in people. And I think he's going to run too far to the left, and nobody's going to know what he actually stands for.
Wait,
once he gets
Biden or Bernie?
Biden, because Bernie brings out the worst in people. I think he's going to do the same to Biden.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So he's going to overcompensate.
I don't know necessarily that the person who's going to make it to the end has entered the race yet, because they keep putting it up against generic Democrat, but the disapproval...
Do you have someone in mind?
I don't. That's...
O'Rourke? Beto?
I don't think he can do it. I don't think he can pull it off.
Yeah, I would be surprised too. He couldn't even pull off Texas. Although it was scarily close.
I think we get somebody out of left field. I don't think it's going to be Oprah, as many people say. But I think we get somebody outside. I think they try to out-Trump Trump again.
Yeah, maybe. It would have to be a celebrity, though, wouldn't it?
It would.
So besides Oprah...
Oh, that's true.
John Legend. He could pull it off.
Is he old
He's
enough?
got EGOT plus the presidency. That would be... I mean, I might vote for him just for that.
Is he old enough?
Yeah, he's older than 35. He's gotta be.
I could run.
Yeah, there you go. Run as a Democrat. See where it takes you.
2020 would be the first time I could run as president.
Jump
Actually,
in.
it is. I'll be 35 next month.
Well, you got time. Let's go. Let's see it.
And I grew up in a union household. I think this channel is a bar to me running for a Democrat, though. I tend to slap them around a little bit.
Everybody has something that they need to... Some skeletons they need to put in their closet. You could hide it. You could cover it up.
Well, I mean, say I'm a bad guy, and I've got some skeletons in my closet. I'll use the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defense. It's perfect.
Yeah, the one that's exactly what she was doing. Good idea there.
Well, we've had some fun already, but this is going to be the fun part, I think, because so much of Western religion is based on the idea of Israel. I think you would have some great takes on this, and just based on the actual wrongness of this. I talked about it in my solo video yesterday. Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman from Minnesota, my neighboring state, and in a district I've actually set foot in before, mind you, has been coming under fire since 2012, let's be honest, but she's been coming under fire recently because she continues to say things that are perceived as anti-Semitic. Much of the mainstream media likes to come out and defend her and say that she's anti-Israel, which there's definitely a difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism, but regardless, she has been proven to be anti-Semitic. They tried to pass a resolution to rebuke her in Congress, and that suddenly mysteriously turned into a resolution to rebuke all hatred in Congress. Many people are saying that it's Islamophobic, that people are trying to attack her and punish her for this. And Omar is actually trying to hide behind Islam itself. Article 6 says there should never be a religious test for anybody to be in the government. So that's something that we need to talk about here. But let's start with you. How much do you know about this topic so far, and where do you see it?
Yeah. Not a ton, actually. I mean, obviously, I've seen the controversy has been going on. I missed what she actually said.
Which time?
Yeah, right. Everything. Who is Ellen Omar again? No. But yeah, I do find it highly ironic that anytime a Republican does anything, take them off their committees, remove them, they're out, whatever, punishments, and then something like this happens where there is bipartisan criticism for egregious things that she said, yet no, we don't need to punish anything. In fact, we just need to talk about all the other kinds of hate that we need to decry at the same time. So yeah, I think that's, I guess, what we expect from the left.
Was that your rainbow of hate?
Yes, this is my rainbow of all the hateful things. But yeah, it's very hypocritical, and I don't know. It's a weird situation. That in every area except anti-Semitism, Democrats are like, everything hateful, is the worst thing. Racism is the worst thing ever. But they're willing to justify anything that I guess could be construed as anti-Semitic. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first off, a lot of the left-leaning sources like Vox are trying to say that this isn't anti-Semitism. This is anti-Israel. And I gave Rashida Tlaib a pass on that for anti-Israel versus anti-Semitism.
Right.
Because she came under fire almost immediately as soon as she was sworn in, because she had the sticky note on her map that had Palestine pasted over Israel. That is an anti-Israel statement. That is a statement against a specific government in a modern nation. Anti-Semitism is something completely different. And when you have a congressperson out there, I don't like going back into old tweets because I find it egregious when they do it on the other side. But, because of the context of it, back in 2012, it's the Jews will hypnotize America. And I was in Matt and Blonde's Discord server having this same argument with white nationalist neo-Nazis, saying many of the same things, that the Jews are hypnotizing the world. That's not anti-Israel.
Islam and white nationalists clasp hands over anti-Semitism.
Right meets left. Somehow. Alt-right. But then, of course, we get the statement come out that, why is AIPAC why are they calling to condemn Rashida Tlaib? It was, it was Tlaib and Omar. Some reporter came out and said that he was announcing the fact that a news story was going to cover, and it was a left-leaning news source, was going to cover the story and why this was happening. And of course, she can't help herself and say, well, it's all about the Benjamins. It's all about the evil Jew gold that's controlling the world.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, which she apologized for and deleted the tweet to do my solo video on it. You wouldn't believe how hard it was for me to go find that tweet again.
Yeah, and then you had Chelsea Clinton tweeting at her like, that she needed to not talk so anti-Semitically, and then she was like, "Oh yeah, well, Islam, you're now you're being hateful towards Islam." So, she doesn't come across as apologetic at all.
Well, of course not, because she went out at a town hall, and what did she say in the town hall? I can't even remember right now. She came out into the town hall. She said something that was even worse, and I can't even remember that. That's really frustrating.
I know, I did that earlier. So now we wait until you remember.
But the fact is that she did come out and say something that was completely anti. Oh, it was right there too. Oh, it was the dual loyalty comment. That was it. Because, and this was something else that I was arguing with those neo-Nazis about too, because half of Congress has dual citizenship with Israel, which I cannot find anything other than Nazi sites that supports that idea, by the way. And therefore, anybody who supports Israel or supports Jews or Israel has dual loyalty, which is another neo-Nazi and original Nazi idea. So she goes and apologizes for it, and then she keeps coming out and saying it.
Yeah, right. At what point do we think that she actually believes what she's saying, Democrats?
Well, this is where I thought that this might actually come well into your wheelhouse, because I had a commenter on my video last night that pointed out the fact that, Muslims and Jews live together in harmony in Israel, and of course they mentioned the fact that Israel is a brand new country that was formed in 1948, which you and I both know is technically true. But, I mean, the division between Judaism, not necessarily Israel itself, but Judaism and Islam, I mean, if you read scripture, that goes back to the time of Abraham.
Right.
Isaac
right.
and Ishmael.
Yeah, right, exactly. So from a religious perspective, it's not surprising, of course, that this is continued on and on for all the many, many centuries. But at the same time, it doesn't make it it doesn't make it something we want to foster in our own country. We have a long history of Judeo-Christian Western civilization, so obviously we have affinity for the Jewish tradition over the Islamic tradition. And so to see more and more of this coming in is a little bit concerning, to say the least, if only for the fact, as an uninvolved Christian observer, you could say, we're bringing the conflict here. Yeah, it's not something that's going to go away. And it's not something that we want to help spread either. So
No, and that's understandable entirely. And it does come, out of a religious context too, because Islam is unique among the Abrahamic religions because the Muslims can mention in their holy book the Christians and the Jews by name. The last mention, you may have read a little bit further more recently than I have, but as far as I know, the last mention of Ishmael is in Genesis.
I think so, yeah.
Of course, Muhammad is a descendant of Ishmael, and in the Quran they talk about the Jewish state, and they talk about the rise in Christianity as well, because Muhammad wasn't walking around the Middle East until 400 years after Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So they're unique in the fact that they can express their feelings towards Christianity and Judaism right in their holy book. Christianity and Judaism can't do that.
Right.
In fact, the majority of the New Testament is basically centered around the fact that Christianity is an extension of Judaism because all of the prominent people that helped to find it were Jews.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of history and relationship between Judaism and Christianity, and so the antagonism has carried over from Islamic antagonism towards Judaism and Christianity. Both, obviously, it's still alive and well, as we see.
Yeah.
So it's not a great thing to see, and it's even worse to see it apologized for across so many voices, and to see that no one is really concerned with uh equal, I don't know, not equal, but offenses on both sides, but no repercussions for Ilhan Omar or anyone else.
Well, I hate the fact that what she continually does when she does all of this too is she goes back and she hides behind her religion. I hate that, and the fact that, like I mentioned at the opening of the topic, it's Article 6 says that we shouldn't have any sort of religious test to be in Congress. Yes, I know Blonde over on Matt and Blonde show has talked about it. I know other prominent media figures, both in the mainstream and in the alternative media, have talked about whether or not Islam is compatible with our government the way it is.
Yeah, that's a good question.
But can we hold somebody to account for it?
Right. Right. And I think in a case like that, no, we don't want to have any sort of religious test for sure. But considering the ramifications that your worldview has on the rest of your life, there are things like, for example, violent anti-Semitism that you would imagine would preclude someone from being elected. So the fact that our culture is shifting enough to embrace these figures that are so culturally opposed to Western values is surprising.
Well, and I think that's an interesting thought too going forward, because I mentioned in the video when I talked about this, I have heard many of the arguments that Representative Omar has made. I've heard many of the arguments that Rashida Tlaib has made. I've heard a lot of the arguments that Omar made while she was a state senator in Minnesota. I can disarm Ilhan Omar just based on ideas. I don't have to bring up the fact that she wears the hijab. I don't have to bring up the fact that she has Islam. But I know what the first thing she's going to do is she's going to go back and hide behind her religion and then turn it back into a religious test, which is unconstitutional.
Yeah, and I do think that's a good way that people have figured out to deflect, and it's a tactic of the left to I've probably guilt people into invoking, well, if you don't vote for this person, you are Islamophobic or whatever, or you're making your religious test, to use that as the reason, so that people are like browbeaten into it, and neither scenario is great, to be honest. Whether one, people are shifting culturally to the point where they do actually want someone with bad ideas and someone with opposing cultural values to be elected, or whether the scenario is that they've been browbeaten into the fear of Islamophobia by not doing it. Either way, it's not a great reality.
Well, I want to, finish this out and circle one thing back to that, because, obviously, yes, we have the question now. I've asked the question, so many other people have. Is Islam culturally compatible enough for us to have Muslims in our Congress? And I look back to because Rashida and Ilhan are not the first Muslims in Congress. In fact, Keith Ellison, who held the seat before Ilhan Omar,
another winner.
He was the first Muslim in Congress. And yes, Keith Ellison has major issues of his own. Yeah. But guess what? None of those issues were. None of those issues were anti-Semitic. He just likes to beat women up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty objectionable there, but yeah, you're right. I don't remember ever hearing any accusations of anti-Semitism from about Keith.
And we would have heard about it instantly too.
Yeah.
But as the commenter on my video also pointed out, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the topic, Muslims and Jews have been living together in harmony for hundreds of years in that same stretch of land that Great Britain ceded to the Jewish people in 1948. Ever since there was an Islam Muslims and Muslims and Jews have been living together in that same stretch of land with absolutely no problems anywhere. In fact, I don't know if let them would be the correct word, but the holiest place in Islam still sits on top of the site of the holiest place in Judaism, and a place that you and I probably hold very dear in our religious beliefs as well. The Dome on the Rock is sitting on top of Solomon's Temple. And nobody's causing a fight over that. Muslims, Jews, and Christians can live together with no problems. I don't think this is a problem of Islam and Islamophobia for Omar. I think Omar is just a bigot.
Yeah, it does seem to lend credence to the possibility that it's not so much a religious problem as a political problem. And so I think, well, yeah, you're probably right. Ilhan Omar's just not a great person all around. I think we're safe to say that.
What a frowny face to end the show on. Let's do something fun.
Okay.
One of the last things I always try to do on the show, because we do tend to end on heavy, sad-faced topics like that, is...
What? There's heavy stuff happening in the world?
I love to ask all of my guests a question. I actually borrowed this from the guest that will be coming on next week, even though he doesn't do this on his show anymore. But I want to know about a hobby that you do. Nothing to do with politics or nothing to do with work. I think your fire theory would be good in this place, but you can obviously talk about whatever you want. This is your time. So tell me about something that's interesting you that has nothing to do with politics or work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good one. Financial independence and retiring early is something that I think it's fun. Once you get started a little way into it, it's more fun than when you're first starting out and feeling overwhelmed. Because the whole idea is, paying off all your debts and saving enough money to become financially independent, so that should you want to quit your job, you can quit your job. So yeah, that's something that I've been working on, and that's been fun because it's kind of a way to set goals and to make give yourself a positive feedback loop of financial reinforcement. But then at the same time, hobby, I don't really know that I would say it's a hobby, because once you get all of your systems in place, you just kind of keep doing it. So, other stuff, I like to read. I was an English major in college, so I like to read, I like to write, I like to watch TV. I love comedies. As a writing major, an English major with a writing emphasis, I wrote a bunch of stuff in college. My senior project was a buddy cop comedy feature screenplay, and it was about this time-traveling cop, like a Bruce Willis type, super badass cop who got thrown from the 80s into the current time, which that was like 2014. Anyway, so I watch a lot of comedies. I watch a lot of just TV in general. So yeah, I'm interested in script writing and the process of how comedy works and what makes jokes. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that I like to do.
That sounds awesome. Any shows you want to recommend?
Yeah, not a comedy, surprisingly, because all of my favorite shows are comedies. Have you watched Killing Eve?
I have not. Where do I find that?
You can watch it on Hulu. It's a BBC America show, but it's on Hulu now, and oh my gosh, it's a wild ride. It's pretty good. It's about a psychopath hitman lady. Yeah, I watched that recently, and it was very entertaining. Also, of course, classic comedies. Futurama is one of the best. Lesser known, but also equally good. Happy Endings was only 3 seasons. Community, of course, is a classic. Yeah, all the comedies, except I never really watched like Family Guy or some of the other Even Simpsons I haven't watched. I have some catching up to do, but Seinfeld, classic.
I
Yeah.
never got into Seinfeld. I'm currently watching Kimmy Schmidt on Netflix. That's a funny one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Season 1 is awesome. Season 2 is meh, and season 3 is okay. But season 1 of that show was so funny.
I'm in love with
Yeah.
anything that Tina Fey writes, so.
Yeah, 30 Rock is another good show.
Oh, they pulled that right after I started watching it.
Oh, from Netflix.
Second episode.
Yeah. Oh, do you have Hulu? You can watch it on Hulu. You have to finish it. It's such a good show. Even though it's pretty liberal, but still, it's a really, really good show. And I like to talk. My brother's super interested in comedy and the way comedy works, and so we always talk about like the progression. Like Seinfeld, for example, you may not think is funny because of the way comedy was done. Sitcoms were done at that time, but Tina Fey, one thing I've noticed with her is her comedy is very heavy reference, heavy like pop culture references. So Kimmy Schmidt, if you don't know a lot of pop culture, you won't get most of the jokes. 30 Rock, if you don't know a lot of pop culture, you won't get the jokes. But if you're in the elite, the in crowd, boy, is it hilarious. Whereas something like Seinfeld, you don't have to come with a lot of prior knowledge. It's just situational stuff. Curb Your Enthusiasm is another hilarious show that's a very leftist liberal show for its time, which could not happen now because now it's politically incorrect. But yeah, I love comedy.
That's great. Well, thank you for coming on the show again. That was a good talk. I was glad to have the opportunity to have this talk with you.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and plug your show one more time?
Sure. If you're interested in religious stuff and the millennial struggle with organized religion and belief in God, you can find my show on iTunes, anywhere you find your podcasts, really, Google Play, etc. It's called the Adventist Millennial Podcast. I release an episode once a week. And I do have a YouTube channel. Every once in a while, I'll post little short videos, but the podcast is my highest priority.
And we'll get some links together here, and we'll make sure that gets posted in the description here.
Cool.
Thanks to the audience for watching this show. As I said in the beginning of the show, if you liked what you heard, make sure that you go over to YouTube and subscribe. That really helps us in the rankings. We will have Brady Leonard on from the No Gimmicks podcast coming up next week. That's going to be very exciting for me because I'm going to fanboy a little bit here because Brady Leonard was my very first... wow, that's really heavy to have at the end of this show here. I got an alert in the area on my phone.
Uh-oh.
It's not a good one. There's an Amber Alert in my area.
Yikes.
Well, we'll make some awareness to that here, but I'm not going to read it right here on the air. When I first started my blog, before I started doing my video show, Brady and his show were my first fan on Twitter.
Nice.
So
cool.
I'm going to fanboy on that a little bit here.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to take this on the go, we are on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, possibly to expand over into other formats as we go. One last announcement here we have before we go off air here. Upcoming, I will be having a debate, an actual Lincoln Douglas style debate with Robert from the Generational Gap. We've talked about this a little bit off air here. We talked about it right before we went on the show, and as you and I are recording right now, Robert is accepting the challenge I gave him live on the air on his show. So neither one of us can watch that, but everyone will hear about this in the morning as well. And of course, if you were listening to this in the morning, you possibly could have heard that last night. Well, I think that's about all that I have.
Cool.
Emily, where can everybody find you on social media?
At SDA Millennial on Instagram and Twitter. Adventist Millennial on Facebook and YouTube.
And as we go forward into the week, I will leave you the way I leave everybody always, every time I end my show. Never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. You have last word.
Yeah, sounds like a good rule of thumb there.
Take care, everyone.